Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the Texas Developmental Screening and Surveillance Echo, brought to you by UT Health San Antonio in collaboration with the Texas Department of State Health Services. My name is Angela Riley. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. A few housekeeping items before we begin. To help us with attendance, please enter your full name, affiliation, and email into the chat. Please remember to stay muted unless you are speaking. And we do encourage using the chat feature and/or raise your hand feature to pose questions and share your perspectives throughout today's session. As a note, these sessions are being recorded for later distribution. And if you're having any connection issues, please privately chat Karen, our wonderful Echo IT, for further assistance. To ensure privacy, no personal health information is allowed at any point during the session. This includes names, addresses, birth dates, appointment dates, or any other identifiable information. And let us always make every effort to avoid bias and stigmatizing terms so that we can continue having this space that is respectful and safe for everyone to learn. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to some introductions. I'll start with Andrea Horton.
Hello, I'm Andrea Horton. I'm the Executive Director at Champions for Children in Tyler, Texas, and the lead agency for Help Me Grow East Texas. So glad that you joined us today.
Thanks, Andrea. Dr. Mendel.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Mandel. I'm an associate professor at UT Health Houston School of Public Health. I'm a developmental psychologist by training, and I'm so happy to be here because promoting early identification and intervention is one of my passions.
Thank you, Dr. Mendel. And we have Faith Rivera, who will also be serving as our lead specialist for today.
Hi, everyone. Faith Rivera, Alice Avitas Consulting. I'm really excited to be here today. Like Dr. Mendel said, early identification, family engaged developmental monitoring are things that I'm very, very passionate about. Excited to hear what we have to learn today.
Thank you, Faith. And playing a dual role of case presenter and didactic presenter, we have Dr. Cox.
Hi, good afternoon and happy Valentine's, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Jennifer Cox. I am System Director for Provider Support and Training at My Resources Tarrant County, working directly with Help Me Grow North Texas and Help Me Thrive North Texas.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. We're so happy you're here. And thank you all. I see a lot of introductions in the chat, so keep it coming. We're happy everyone has joined today. With that, we will go ahead and move into our didactic presentation. So I give the mic back to you, Dr. Cox, and once Karen shares your slides, you may take it away.
Great, thank you. Okay, good to see everybody today. And as you know, today's topic is family engaged developmental monitoring and screening, which is such an important topic for all of us that work in this space with young children. Okay, next slide. So to get started, just some disclosures. These ideas and views that will be shared are mine from research in referring to different agencies such as Help Me Grow, CDC, that work in the space of early screening and development. And I have no financial conflicts to disclose concerning this presentation. And then as far as unconscious bias, we all recognize that despite our best efforts to avoid biases, that we may miss something, and we acknowledge that that might happen. If so, we do apologize, and we ask for your feedback. I know the ECHO team wants to continue always improving what takes place in these times together. Okay, so family engaged monitoring and developing developmental screening. Why is this so important, and why do we want to do this? And it's because our goal is to help all children reach their full potential. And as we go through these different slides, we'll talk a little about the difference in monitoring, the difference in screening, and why we want to do both. and include families in that. And it's largely because that gives us the best information about children. And it also is universal. It's not just when a parent or a provider has concern about a child, but we catch those children where it may, they may be right there on the bubble and someone doesn't bring a concern to us. But through the constant monitoring and regular screening, we're able to catch those concerns. Okay, thank you. So in past echoes and in being in this field, I think we all recognize that early identification and early intervention is what our hope is for all children who need it. So that's another big why for family engaged developmental monitoring and screening, is it gives us the best opportunities to connect families to supports intervention earlier, to help lead to the best outcomes for children and to build those teamwork and trust relationships with families. Next slide. So why do we engage families? Because they are the experts about their own children. But we also know that this continuous monitoring and regular screening helps build a family's understanding of developmental milestones and what is age-appropriate behavior. And we also know that that knowledge about child development is a protective factor for families, that it helps them know what to expect. It helps, I think, all of us not take some behaviors personally when we know that's just what a 2-year-old does. They're not trying to make me mad. Or that's why this activity is so hard, because there's certain skills that that child has not yet developed. So again, it makes the families, gives them more access to information about milestones and age-appropriate behavior. It helps create that team approach. And as we build that trust with families, and have these continuous conversations about milestones and what we're going to see next and what we can do to help the child reach the next milestone, it builds trust too, which helps that parent feel more comfortable coming to us when they do have a concern about development. And that positive relationship also helps families take information that we may share regarding observations we've had of their children, and any recommendations we had. And I think if we think even as us as adults, you know, if a friend that I trust and have a great relationship with comes and says something that they've observed in what I'm doing that could be better, and they make recommendations, I'm much more willing to take that than if someone I don't have that trust with comes up, and then it just feels like criticism instead of somebody trying to help and provide support. Okay, the next slide. So what is the difference between developmental monitoring and screening? And here are some of the differences. Developmental monitoring is ongoing. It is over a long period of time, and you use tools such as milestone checklist. And we'll get more into these in future slides. But the difference in screening is you would use a standardized tool such as the Ages and Stages questionnaire that's been discussed in prior echoes with this group. Developmental screening is going to be completed at specific age intervals. One example of age intervals is here with the American Academy of Pediatrics at that 9, 18, and 30 months. Other possibilities, you could screen more often, is certainly possible too, but you know you're looking at specific ages. The Ages and Stages questionnaire has multiple intervals in addition to these with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And that screening also is a snapshot of one point in time. On February 14th, 2025, this is what Jennifer is demonstrating skill-wise, as opposed to let's look at what's changed over time and celebrate that. Okay, next slide. So why, again, the family engaged developmental monitoring? So according to Help Me Grow National, we recognize that families are the experts on their children. They see what they do. They're able to observe them in everyday situations at home, in the community, with other family members. And so they have that expert knowledge that they can bring when we have conversations about development. Again, we want that holistic picture. It is not just what Jennifer is able to do, maybe when the home visitor is in the home, or it's not just the skills Jennifer is demonstrating in my classroom, those kinds of things. But when we include the parent, we are able to get that more holistic picture. And then, as mentioned before, we want to discuss how development has changed over time. And who would know that better than the family members that have been with that child over the years? Okay, next slide. So how can we engage families in this monitoring process? And each of these could probably be a whole 20-minute echo didactic to begin with. So just to touch briefly on these, but again, we want to make sure we're building culturally responsive relationships. You know, how culture plays out in a home impacts what a child may have access to or the activities that they do routinely, and therefore their developmental skills. So we want to make sure we're responsive to that. We always want to be considerate of home language, use interpreters, translators when possible, provide materials in that home language also. We want to develop families' understanding of healthy development through those ongoing conversations, talk about healthy development, share tools with them, and we'll look at some of the tools that you could share in just a minute. And then also encourage families to talk to their healthcare provider, because again, we are all a big team that is working with the family, and we want to make sure that we're encouraging them to communicate to all of us that are involved. Next slide. So a big part of developmental monitoring is the celebration of milestones. So we want to be, again, using those checklists, having the conversations with families, encouraging them to monitor the checklist to see what their child is doing that we can celebrate, and what kind of activities can we do to help lead to the next milestone. So next slide. These next couple of examples are things from the CDC website that you can go to cdc.gov/actearly. You can print many of these. You can also request that some be sent to your location as well. But they have made available milestone checklist. They focus on ages from 2 months up to 5 years. Not only can you print and copy them, as I mentioned, but they are available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, simplified Chinese, and Korean. And with these checklists come tips to promote development. So we can provide these to families. We can use these in our classrooms during home visiting sessions, however we are interacting with families and have conversations. Next slide. The CDC Milestone Tracker is another great tool that you can use to monitor development over time. This is free to families, to providers, to anyone who accesses the app. You can even enter multiple children in the app. And then over time, again, I have a friend who mentioned the other day that, she's sitting while her car is getting its oil changed, and she pulls out the tracker while she has time just to wait to see, oh, have I checked everything? Is there anything else I need to mark that they've done, and what's coming up next? And then again, it will also alert caregivers and families to if there is a concern that they may need to act early and reach out to someone. There's also a report that can be shared through the app with if as a provider, if you're keeping one of the children in your classroom, you can share it with families. And then also families can share the report with their pediatrician and with other providers they may work with. Okay, next slide. There's also a milestone moments booklet. This again would be a paper option, but you're able to mark and keep track of your child's development over time. It again provides activities to support development. It will give guidance about when they may need to seek support. And this particular booklet is available in English and Spanish. Next slide. Thank you. So those are just some ways that you can monitor those milestones. And then again, making sure that you're celebrating those with the families. We want to be talking about those strengths that the children and families have and encouraging those. So developmental screening, as I mentioned, is a little bit different because it is at specific intervals and uses tools. I believe it was in the last ECHO, the ages and stages questionnaire was reviewed. So we won't get into all of those specifics, but we'll talk about screening overall. Next slide, please. So again, with the screening tool, for family engagement, we want to make sure we are getting parent report. And some of the reasons that is so important is that we know from ASQ research that there's a 93% agreement between parents and professionals. So again, just highlighting that parents truly are the experts on their children. That most parents are reliable and accurate when reporting on their child's development. Parent concerns are highly predictive of child outcomes. So when a parent is concerned, often, and the majority of the time, there is reason to be concerned and something we need to seek more information about. There is some research to show that there are times when there might be a concern that a parent isn't aware of. So if they are concerned, that's highly predictive of the need that a child may have. On the other side, though, if we are doing continuous monitoring and developmental screening, then we're able to catch those that a parent may not bring to our attention because they're not aware that there is a need to be concerned yet. I know I've said this multiple times throughout the presentation, but parents are the expert on their child. One of my first jobs out of undergrad was working in a early learning setting to where half of the children in the class had a hearing loss or were deaf. The other the other half of the children all had typical hearing. So the idea was a language-rich environment. They're benefiting from the children who are using oral language, and we're just all learning together. And there was a young child who had received a cochlear implant and was not speaking yet at school, even after some extensive intervention that, of course, was continuing. But the conversation had started to come to, should they be in a class that focuses more on sign language? And the mother kept saying, but she does talk. She talks at home all the time. And you know how sometimes we can be as professionals. There was that, really? Does she talk at home? That's so odd because she's never said anything at school. And so the mom was encouraged to videotape the child speaking at home. And This was in the 90s, so there was no iPhone to pop out and video the child, but the mom got a video recorder. She recorded it, brought the tape up to school, and lo and behold, that child spoke quite a bit at home. And so that was such powerful information that that mom had. Because again, we know that children show their highest skill among their caregivers, and it changed the way we were able to address the needs of that child. Okay, next slide. So how can we equip our staff to participate in developmental monitoring and screening that engages families? One, we want to encourage our staff and build their skills so that they have confidence in communicating about development on a regular basis. So again, what do those drop-off conversations look like? What do the pickup conversations look like? What kind of communication might travel back and forth between home and school to where you're able to talk about development in a continuous manner? If you're a home visitor, what do those conversations look like regularly that we're going to just always talk about development and what's coming up next? Making sure that we're using strength-based person-first language. So building our staff skills in communication in a way that builds that trust with families, that builds that teamwork. And how do we reflect back to families the knowledge and the observations that they bring to us? So building the skills in staff to be able to highlight and celebrate what a parent has noticed and is able to share with us. Next slide. And so the benefits of family engaged developmental monitoring and screening. So again, we're continuously looking at milestones, celebrating those. Then we're also taking a deeper look at periodic times with the validated tool, including the families in that, valuing their input, seeking their input, and acknowledging the expertise that they have. Helps create a more inclusive, culturally responsive system so we can identify any delays or disabilities as early as possible. It also helps families better understand what protective factors they already have and how they can continue to support development. The families then are equipped with recommendations to promote development at home. And we're able to create links between a family's goals and what types of services and supports there are in the community. And it builds that family member's skills in advocating for their child, which is a lifelong skill that we all want for the children that we love and care for. And I think, is that the last slide? It is, okay.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Dr. Cox, for your wonderful presentation on family engaged development, monitoring and screening. I'd like to open the floor to anyone in our group if they have questions or comments for Dr. Cox.
There's one in the chat.
Yes, I just saw that. I invite you, Camlyn, to unmute and expand on that, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually a project manager, but I collaborate with the Harris Center for Mental Health, and I trust the team's expertise and so forth. But I used to be a special ed teacher in a classroom, but I haven't had experience with the younger age populations. And we try to have a practice of not misdiagnosing students and not misinterpreting any kind of early signs, because of that, for example, the paperwork and an IEP can really detour a child's, life in the school system. So I was wondering, I haven't used the app, but do you have best practices or want to share maybe another example of how to communicate, if their child is missing a milestone based on the app, if they consistently miss it, or if the family, for example, my cultural background is Vietnamese. Some families may be resistant to, the data that's in the app. Any experiences that can be shared regarding these challenges, I would really appreciate.
Sure. When we do the case study later, I think that will be helpful too, because it does have to do with how the continuous conversations can help a family. Because often it does take multiple conversations. No parent wants to think their child isn't developing at an expected rate. And so, again, it's often that relationship. It is repeated conversations. Even with my own family members, when there's been a concern with the niece or nephew, it's never been a one time. I'm concerned about, Jennifer who's doing this. And, even my sisters don't jump on it when they hear it from me. It's multiple times that I bring it up, and then they'll, well, okay, let's go get that checked out. So I don't know if that's answering your question. That is part of the goal of the continuous monitoring, is that you're talking about development all the time. And then you're able to encourage them that if they're in that birth to 3 range, then you're asking them if you can refer them to ECI. You're encouraging the parent to contact and make a referral. You might be referring them back to their pediatrician. If they're above 3, you could be encouraging them to reach out to the school district to make an early childhood special ed referral for evaluation. I also imagine the team here on this call may have many other ideas as well.
Dr. Cox, thank you. Yeah, I suspect just being sensitive to like how the family is reacting to the data. So I understand we have to be like factual and like sticking to what we observe. But I'm just wondering if there's like more experiences, but this is also my first session. So thank you for giving me the floor to kind of expand and elaborate my thoughts.
And thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here, Cameron. That's wonderful. It's your first session. Griselda, I do see your hand is raised.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to piggyback on that. I work with an early head start program, and I didn't know about this application, and I think it's a really cool tool. I just recently talked about the CDC milestones booklets that are available to some families. But I do want to say that in my little experience that I have a few years working with early childhood education, when we do assessments, we utilize the ASQs, and then we do like formal assessments in the classrooms, and then we see that it's a trend that we're looking at something that the children are not mastering. And then we talk to parents and we do ECI referrals. I will say, I don't have a percentage in my mind, but I will say a high percentage of those children that they go through our program, that is 3 years, they get the help from ECI and they get way better. So by the time that they go to the elementary school, they don't have to go through an IEP process or anything like that because they got the help earlier.
Griselda, I love that you made that point. I was, as you were speaking, thinking of that too, that if we, can normalize that we all need help with something at different times in our life. So, if you're tracking milestones and you do a screening with a 2-year-old, so back to the question we had just talked about, that mentioning, hey, it doesn't mean that there is a disability, or it's, hey, let's reach out to this person. Are you okay with that? So we can see what things we might be able to do to help move things along and help them reach the next milestone. That it may be a temporary support that they need.
Thank you all for your participation for our Q&A. In the interest of time, I would like to point you all to our chat if you'd like to share any further comments or questions for Dr. Cox on her presentation or her expertise. Please drop that in the chat. We'll go ahead and move on to announcements for now. Karen, when you're ready, if you can share the slides, please. Thank you, Karen. So please don't forget to claim credit using your TechPeds account and scanning the QR code on the screen. You may also use the link in the chat to access that information. Next slide, please. Are you interested in presenting a case? Cases can describe a challenge that you are presently facing with a child in your care. Challenges could be around screening, interventions, referrals, etc. As a case presenter, you do not have to prepare a formal presentation. We will have a case form for you to fill out and to share throughout our session. So to submit a case, please use the link that will be shared in the chat. Next slide, please. Join us at our next Texas Dishes Echo on Friday, March 14th. We will have Kristen Omore, one of our own from our Learning Network, present that day. Next slide, please. And finally, after our case presentation that Dr. Cox will take us through, we will move into breakout rooms for the case discussion. And that'll be for about 10 to 15 minutes. We will then move back into the main session, and a representative from each of the breakout room groups will share a summary on what was discussed. And so please be on the lookout for the message from Karen, our IT, on when those breakout rooms will be closing. So right now we will go ahead and move on to our case presentation for today. But before we do, I'd just like to remind everyone that no protected health information is allowed either in the chat or our discussion in our breakout rooms. And let's continue having the space that's inclusive and open to respectful dialogue. So Dr. Cox, once Karen shares the case, please walk us through it. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a case that has been experienced by one of the members of my team. It was in an early childhood classroom, but I think this is an example of something you could also experience in a home visiting situation or other services that a family may be receiving. But there was a little girl around the age of 2. She was attending an early childhood program, and her teachers were concerned about her language development and had observed some behaviors that were concerning to them. The 2-year-old was banging her head on the floor and not using words to communicate, and appeared to be engaging in sensory-seeking behaviors. The teachers had shared their concerns, but the parents were, quote, holding off. They reported that their pediatrician told them that these behaviors were normal for a 2-year-old. So the case study is really what are some things that the teachers or those concerned about this young lady, the little 2-year-old, and what could they do to help support her and the family in seeking assistance.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. And we will give Karen, our IT, a minute to put us into our breakout room so we can begin our discussion. Thank you all. Welcome back, everyone. Looks like we have most people. We'll go ahead and jump straight into our group summaries. So from Dr. Mendel and Andrea's group, if someone from that group could give us a brief summary of what they discussed.
I'm pointing at you.
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, we had a great discussion. Really, we talked about, just continuing to put that in front of our families to keep giving them evidence-based tools that show what's going on, and not having opinions and, feelings, but tools that are evidence-based, that are factual, that just that show it, and giving that to them as well so that they can take that back to their pediatrician. And so and in the meantime, with those family or within that center, creating a safe space for that child and trying to eliminate the triggers that are causing some of the behaviors that are concerning and putting the child at risk.
I just want to emphasize something, Andrea, that you said when you work in a situation like that. It kind of doesn't matter. Like if the family is willing to go into services for this child, the fact is in that child care center, they're experiencing a child who is banging their head and something needs to be done in the child care center. And I love that you regrounded that into doesn't matter. This is a problem in the center and we have to have a solution in the center.
Thank you all. Any other thoughts from anyone in the group? It's okay if not. Alrighty. Faith, if you could give us a summary of our group, please, and then you can move straight into the overall summary of both.
Awesome. Yes.
Thank you.
So in our breakout room, we had a really great discussion, really, again, highlighting the use of the tools. There were several folks within our group that not only use the ASQ, but other evidence-based tools and really equipping parents with that information to take to the pediatricians. And we talked about, doctors are trained to look at data. And so when we empower our parents with the tools and the data to take to their doctors, they're more likely to take the concerns seriously because there is evidence behind what the parents are experiencing. Really emphasizing the importance of building that team between the parent, the child, and the provider, that it takes all of the individual parties together to build that trust, to build that team, and to really make headway towards the goals that they are shooting for, and that there's not just one way or service to be able to get parents the help that they need, that there are a lot of different programs and resources out there for parents to access, and it's just helping them to find the best fit for them. So that's kind of from our group. And then overall, kind of the high level takeaways that are not going to be repetitive of what our groups discussed was really just that reminder that all children deserve to reach their fullest potential. And it is on us as providers to walk alongside the parents, to validate their concerns, to give them the tools, information, and resources, and respect them as the expert in their child's development. That oftentimes parents do see the concerns before they're even brought up by the ASQ or other tools, and to really validate their concerns and then give them the evidence through the resources. Universal celebration and screening is the best way to ensure that all children meet their milestones and meet their fullest potential. And it's up to us as providers to really empower parents to move forward in that way.
Excellent summaries, Faith. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that participated in our discussions throughout the session today, for bringing your perspectives, for adding that holistic view, and just highlighting the importance of empowering parents and empowering families to have those conversations with their children's healthcare providers. It's really wonderful. So yes, with that, as a reminder, please complete the session survey using the link in the chat that Karen just shared. Cannot thank you all enough for your participation and being here today. We look forward to seeing everyone next month on March 14th. Take care.